This morning's sermon is out of the ordinary, as I mentioned before. Rather than talking about a specific topic, I'm going to answer some of your questions, or at least try to. I want to be clear, this isn't the claim that I have the answer to your questions, nor is it a game of Stump the Minister. I usually understand my preaching as a conversation starter, rather than the definitive answer on any topic. And that's partially because I'm reluctant to claim a definitive answer about most of the big questions. But more so, it's because this is the way we do theology as Unitarian Universalists, through conversations with one another. We build our beliefs in community, as we compare and contrast what gives meaning and what we find truth in with each other. So today's sermon aims to more closely embody that spirit of conversation. So all the questions that have been written, and I can almost guarantee that I will not get through them, I will keep them and they will be fodder for future thought and future sermons if I don't get to yours. So, this first question says, what is one word that you use to describe our congregation? The first word that came into my mind, and I promise this was a spontaneous response, was home. It's part of our mission statement that Tapestry strives to be a home for liberal spirituality and a dynamic community leader in Orange County and beyond. See, someone does memorize that thing. I like the sense of home for a few different reasons. One, because it's where a family gathers. It's hopefully comforting. It's also the place that we learn and grow. And home, I think, has come to mean a different thing in the past 15 years. There's not this sense of rootedness that your home is your forever home and you shall never leave. We live in a pretty mobile world, and we're coming to terms with that as religious communities and understanding that people come in and leave us as their life changes. But I think it's nice that we're a home for as long as it's a useful and helpful home for people to be here. How long do I have? This is, what's the nature of God if there is one? I will preface this by saying it depends on who you ask. For Unitarian Universalists, there obviously is a huge spectrum. A large portion of folks are solidly confident that there is nothing that remotely resembles God, and they're uncomfortable with that language. I shouldn't say they're uncomfortable with that language. It's not meaningful or helpful to them. For a lot of people in our tradition, God is a very real identity, something that they have a personal relationship. And for a whole lot of us in the middle, there's a whole lot of mystery. For myself and the folks in the middle, which I think is actually more of us than we often recognize, mystery is the first word that comes to mind. I spoke, I don't know if it was a couple of Sundays ago, about a notion of the minimalist vision of transcendence, which is, again, a terrible name, but it's basically a recognition that unexpected good things emerge seemingly out of nothingness in our lives. And those moments are to be appreciated and captured. And for some, that's just random coincidence. For some people, that's God making it happen. I guess, and this is a really wishy-washy answer, but I'm going to say What's more important to me is to feel God in those moments than to be able to describe God or know exactly what God is or what the nature of God is. How's that for wishy-washy? Well, there we go. Next question, Reverend Kent, do you believe in God? It's interesting because I think this answer changes for me about every other year. Actually, every 2 years, I'm going to say. A lot of times in my life, God, the word, just is not helpful and is not something that and I recognize that it's helpful for other people and means everything to them. For me, it labels a sense of optimism that doesn't ring true with my experience. Other times, I need something more stable that I can relate to, something that I can share my concerns with, something that I can plead for a little help with, something stable, not certain, but a little more stable than the ebb and flow of my everyday life. And if I'm completely honest, this year, with a whole lot of things in transition here at Tapestry and otherwise, God has become a more meaningful concept to me, and you may recognize I'm using it more in worship services. I don't have any expectation that that's going to be an always and forever truth for me, but it's helpful right now. Who is your favorite philosopher and why? Question pickers, you're fired. Who's my favorite philosopher? I don't know that I can name. Honestly, I'm trying to think of. Okay, I'll go out on a limb, because it comes to mind. Kantian categorical imperative notions of there's an always right and an always wrong is hugely out of fashion in our world of context. We think that in this moment you should do what's appropriate, in this moment it may be different, and in that culture it's different, and in that culture it's different. And I have a deep appreciation for that, but I also think, especially in our progressive communities, there's something to be said for saying something is right or wrong consistently anywhere, and that makes us squirm a lot. But I think it might be something for us to explore a little bit more. So it's not so much like, yay, I'm a Kantian through and through, but I think there's a lot for us to be learned in that philosophical tradition. Do we know what categorical imperative is? No, okay, I'm sorry. So Kant basically argued that there are universal truths, universal moral laws. I don't know that I can name them all, but the simple ones are don't murder. The one that gets complicated is don't lie. He basically says you should never, ever lie, and it is never, ever the right thing to do. And in all of our lives, we can easily imagine circumstances where lying, telling even short, small, white lies, makes life more comfortable, maybe even helps people tremendously. So the Kant's philosophical concept is that our journey toward understanding the way the world works is a journey of making some hard and fast rules in our lives that are always and forever rules. And I think that we as progressive folks could do a little more of that. How do we know free will exists? So do we get what this question is asking? Yes. Okay. No. There are some. Okay. Yes and no. I'm seeing. So one of the big theological questions, particularly in the Protestant tradition, is the concept of predestination, and whether or not God is a bit of a puppet master, and sorry, that's kind of condescending, but controls all of our lives and all of the choices that we make, and that we may just be actors on a stage and not really aware of our own actions and not really even doing them by our own free will. So that's what free will is suggesting. How do we know that we are actually responsible for this moment and this time and thinking independently and doing what it is that we're doing, which in today's very secular world seems like a strange question, but if you go back just a few centuries, when God is a very clear, omnipotent, omnipresent force that defines the universe, people were deeply concerned about, what am I doing here? What is my role in this whole big play of life? So that's background on free will. And my answer is, I can't wrap my head around not having free will. If I decide I want to wave this piece of paper in the air, I wave this piece of paper in the air. And to the best of my knowledge, that's me doing it, not someone up there. So there's free will for you. What's the best you joke you've ever heard? The one that always comes to mind is, how many UUs does it take to change a light bulb? And the answer goes something like, it requires a committee to discern which type of light bulb best fits the theological and ethical framework of our community, whether it's incandescent. So you get the point. The other joke that I have heard that I don't know, that it actually frustrates me, because I think we have potential to be much better musicians than we are as a community. But there's this joke about, why are Unitarians such bad hymn singers? It's that we are reading in advance to see if we agree with the words or not. Which there's a grain of truth to our. I'm serious. In our ability to engage in visceral musical expression and artistic expression in our time of worship, we get so wrapped up in details and whether or not it's right that we can't be in the moment, and that's a shame. So that, I think that joke is funny, but it does not feel good to me. Interesting. Are individual Unitarian churches required to remove posters that say we are standing on the side of love? So this refers to a sermon. How many of you were here for the Standing on the Side of Love sermon? Okay, not as many as would it make it a whole lot easier if you were. There's a recent movement in our tradition. So Standing on the Side of Love, we have this poster. I see at least one t-shirt of Standing on the Side of Love. Standing on the Side of Love was a song. It's a beloved UU song that was commissioned. It was actually a response to the marriage equality movement in Boston. And it became the name of a hugely successful campaign around our justice movements. In fact, people in progressive circles know us as the people in yellow because we show up in force in our yellow t-shirts for justice campaigns of all sorts. And standing on the side of love is partially so powerful because its language is so inclusive, so we wear them to all sorts of different events. More recently, the community of folks with disabilities have said that standing isn't language that works well for them, and it particularly in justice movements, because they have been involved in a lot of justice movements. In response, the writer of the original song said, "Oh my goodness, that's a big problem. I'm going to change the name of my song." And the folks who organized the campaign have also said, "Oh, that was kind of a big oversight. We should sort of look at revamping this." It's not a small effort. There's a whole national campaign. There's memorabilia like this all over. I have a coffee mug on my desk. There's stuff everywhere. So some folks are moving very quickly. I still see a lot of that even on websites, so I don't think it's getting removed. I think the key question here is required. It's hard to imagine what any Unitarian church could be required to remove or put up. It would be, I can imagine a few things, but the word standing is not going to be in that required category. So no, we are not required. It's something that a lot of us are thinking about and having some complicated, uncomfortable conversations about. What is the Organization of Unitarian Universalism doing to create an attraction to our church? I think this is referring to outreach from our Unitarian Universalist Association. Not as much as I would like. There is an office that focuses on outreach in our UUA. To be clear, our wider denomination has been slowly downsizing in numbers and membership, and the economic recession was financially devastating to our denomination. So staff people have been whittled down left and right. The way I heard it explained was that we've cut away some of the bone, and it's just, we don't have enough staff people to do what we need to do in the world. But what we do, I was actually poking around. We're looking at revamping our website. There are resources there for working on website materials. I know that probably 12 years ago, 13 years ago, there was a PR campaign in Orange County that the UUA helped us with. Congregations paid for, but the UUA gave us some pretty strong resources to do direct mailing and radio advertisements in the area. So our national office does a little bit, some of what they can, but we also could do more as a congregation. If that means one-on-ones, it may also mean when we move to our new location, going out and meeting our new neighbors, which I know is a little bit terrifying, but there are lots of opportunities there. A book you've read that moved you. It's strange. I was just thinking about this book the other day. I must have been in high school, and a friend of mine gave me a copy of a book called The Lost Language of Cranes, or The Secret Language of Cranes. It's a decent book. And it looked like it had been a stolen library copy because it had that, like, it was hard covered with the crinkly clear wrapping on the outside. Anyway, the reason it was meaningful to me was it was the first time that it was queer literature. It was a story of a gay guy growing up in New York. And that was the first time that I had read a book that I could relate to. And because I remember I was working as a lifeguard that summer and reading it. I remember the pool that I was at. I remember sitting there and like devouring this book because it was the first time a story really resonated with me and kind of turned me on to reading in a way. I'm not a huge bibliophile, but it broadened my idea of what the enjoyment of reading could be. Yeah. Let's see here. Can we send a note to the mosque down the street? There are Egyptian families in that congregation. From Sherilyn. Thank you, Sherilyn. Where are you? There you are. Yes. I think that is an awesome idea. Sherilyn has been working hard, sort of as a solo campaign, to outreach to our neighbors across the street. We were actually going to try to worship with them during our 6-month time in the wilderness before we move into our new location. We realized that the logistics were just going to be too uncomfortable for them and too uncomfortable with us in a very tight schedule and tight building. But we have asked their leader to come speak to us on a Sunday morning as soon as he can. So we are working on that. But thank you. I had not even thought of Egyptian families being there. And yes, we will, at the greeters table, have an opportunity for you to write some notes. Thanks. Has anyone thought of having a potluck dinner, something Thanksgiving and on Thanksgiving and Christmas Day? A few like me who would feel less lonely. Yes, I do know that on that's Christmas Eve, I'm sorry. So Christmas Eve is a Sunday. We're having worship that evening here at Tapestry, but Christmas Eve morning, I will be going to Laguna Beach, and everyone is invited to go to Laguna Beach for a very casual holiday sort of celebration. I'll tell you what, if you are looking for a place to go on Thanksgiving or on Christmas, email me or call me and I can make some connections. Because I know that a few people host small gatherings at their home, but I don't think any of us are prepared to say, come on over. But let me know, and hopefully I can make some one-on-one connections. Because, and I'm glad this was written, I haven't arranged anything this time of year. I normally, in worship, do a blue Christmas sort of worship or a recognition that this is a hard time of year for a lot of us. So hopefully making some of those connections can reduce some of that difficulty. This was written in advance. Facebook has been charged with, okay, this is the last one, with inventing thousands of users and posting imaginary biographies online to increase traffic volume. Facebook has recently been found to allow posting of black-white hate messages from Russian sources. A current news story cites research that teenagers who are heavy Facebook users are more likely to be depressed and even suicidal. Is there any chance we will stop encouraging the use of Facebook as part of our weekly service? There's a chance. That was the question? No, I'm sorry, that's flippant. It's a good question. I was listening to NPR yesterday and was actually it wasn't NPR, it was BBC. And there was a story about YouTube and the predatory nature of some of the material there, particularly targeting young people, which is Kantian unacceptable under any means or circumstances. Line in the sand and not okay. Facebook, I think, is entering a very complicated age. I don't know how much folks have been reading up on this, but it's basically been a platform for Russian infiltration into our political conversation, and it's a platform for fomenting hatred and discontent and destabilizing our democracy. Whether or not we engage in that platform is a tough conversation. I'm reminded of any new technology is really uncomfortable for those folks using it, and they have to figure out ethical ways of engaging with it, whether that's television or radio or newspapers or Facebook. Yes, it's something to think about, and I would welcome more in-depth conversations, because I know at first when we started talking about it, not everyone was thrilled with Facebook, but as the ethical problems of it become more palpable, those conversations need to keep going. So, amen.